Hey guys, welcome back. Today on The Untidy Artist, I have a special guest. This is my son, Seth, and we are going to show you how to make Gemstone Soap. Gemstone Soap is made using a melt and pour soap base. You use mica and lots of glitter to color it, whatever fragrance you'd like, and then the fun part is you take it and you cut different facets and angles in it to create what looks like a gem. Now, we had a great time picking out the different colors that we decided to put in the soap. This was a fun project for us to do together. My son loves to be creative, and it was just a fun summertime project that we were able to do together, and he picked out the fragrances and the colors and everything that we have here today. So I'm really excited to show you how to do this. Let's grab some supplies and get started. Now, the first thing you'll need is some melt and pour soap base. I will be using clear melt and pour soap base, as well as a little bit of the white melt and pour soap. I order mine online. I know that you can get it at your local craft store. If you're unfamiliar with melt and pour soap, you'll want to check out my melt and pour soap tutorial that kind of takes you through the basics. Then we are going to use some mica to color our soap. I like using mica because it's really sparkly and it adds a lot of really bright, beautiful color, as well as some different glitter and sparkles. And we decided to go with greens and blues. And then I have this gorgeous gold mica that will make it look more like a gemstone. And then the Solar Storm glitter that just is a little bit iridescent and absolutely gorgeous. Then we've got our fragrance. We'll be using Apple from Nurture Soap. My son picked this one out. You can also leave it unscented or use essential oils if you'd like. Then we have something to cut our soap with, some measuring cups to melt it in, and some spoons to stir things with. Then you'll need some different molds. Now I have the silicone mold. You can also use old yogurt containers, little glass containers, just anything you have lying around the house. And then you'll need a big mold to put your soap into, the whole thing. So for the bigger mold, I'm going to be using this old milk carton, and I just like to grab some scissors and cut opening in the top, and then I seal up the sides with some duct tape, and it gives me the perfect container to pour our soap into, so to help it mold before we cut it into our gemstone. So you can see here I'm just kind of trimming this milk carton and I am turning it into a little mold. I love doing this because it uses up my old milk cartons, and it's just a really easy mold. The inside of it is lined so the soap pops out like a dream, and this is my favorite way to do the gemstone soap. So you can see I've got my duct tape here and I'm just kind of taping the sides so it all stays together. One thing you want to be really careful of is making sure that any of the parts that you're taping together are sealed really well, because you don't want any of your soap leaking out. Ta-da! Okay, now go ahead and grab your melt and pour soap, and I'm using an entire 2-pound block of it, and I'm going to take half of it, cut it up into cubes, and put it into one of my glass containers to go in the microwave. And then what you'll do is you'll melt half of it. I start with at about a minute, and then I take it out and stir it, and then I put it in for 30 seconds, take it out and stir it. And you want to continue doing that until your soap base is completely melted. You want to make sure you don't overcook it because you don't want it to burn. So you can see I've got half of them in this container. I'm going to go ahead and melt that, and then I'm going to cut up the rest, and I'm going to set that aside. Then you're going to get your colors ready. So you take anywhere from about a half a teaspoon of your mica to about a full teaspoon, depending on how dark you want your colors to be. You measure into separate containers, and then you're going to take about a half teaspoon of rubbing alcohol and mix them together. I'm using 91% rubbing alcohol, and what this does is it helps the glitter disperse better into your soap. So instead of getting big clumps of glitter, it's all going to blend beautifully, and you'll have sparkly, gorgeous soap. So once you have those all mixed together, you're going to set those aside and you're going to measure fragrance. I'll be using a tablespoon and a half. You want to make sure you use a fragrance oil that doesn't contain vanilla. So make sure that you check the ingredients. Vanilla will turn your soap brown. So in this case, instead of getting a beautiful green and blue gemstone soap, we'd have a brownish blue and green Gemstone Soap, so make sure you check the ingredients. Then I'm going to grab just about 2 blocks of my white melt and pour soap base. I'm not going to fragrance this at all, and I'm just going to cut it up. So I'm just kind of shaving it a little bit and cutting it into little pieces to add a little bit of white dimension to our soap. And once you've done that, go ahead and set that aside. And now grab your melted soap. So I did cook this for a total of about 2, maybe 3 minutes. Once again, at 30-second intervals. I'm going to take half of my fragrance oil and stir that in really well. And then I'm going to divide my melted soap up into 4 separate containers. It doesn't matter if they're perfectly even. I just kind of eyeballed it, and then I'm going to get each of my little cups of color, and I'm going to stir them into each of the separate containers. So I have my lovely assistant here helping me. He was really excited to stir the colors. This is one of the funnest parts because you get to see it start to come to life, and it's sparkly, and the colors are just so gorgeous. So make sure that they're stirred together really well. And then you're going to pour them into whatever container you've chosen. So I have my little silicone mold here, and I'm just going to pour the different colors into the separate molds. And after you pour your melt and pour soap base into one of the sections, you want to make sure that you spray it with rubbing alcohol. This will get rid of the bubbles that can form on the top. You don't need to worry about the rubbing alcohol sticking around. It does evaporate. But you can see I'm just kind of separating the colors. I did have some extra of some of the colors, so I just kind of poured the extra into one. So I've got one of the little containers that has a bunch of different colors in it. And then I took some of my extra mica and just kind of poured it on the top of one of them. Spray it with my rubbing alcohol, and then you want to let it dry. So it did take about an hour or so. You want to make sure that they're fully dried, and then pop them out of your mold, whatever mold it is that you chose. And it really doesn't matter what shape of mold that you use for this part, because you're going to be cutting these up into little pieces. So you can see some of these really pretty colors here. Now we're going to take each of these little pieces and cut them into different geometric shapes. So my son's using this really cool little flat blade type thing that is perfect because it's not really sharp. And we're just cutting these up into different shapes. The more random, the better. There's no perfect way to do this. You can see we've got a lot of triangles here and just different faceted shapes. And once we have those all cut up, I grabbed my Solar Storm glitter and I sprinkled it over the top. And then I'm going to grab my rubbing alcohol, give it a little spray, and stir it. So the rubbing alcohol is going to help the glitter stick to these pieces of soap. Once again, it does evaporate, so you don't need to worry about it staying in your soap. And I really like glitter, so I added more glitter, sprayed it a little bit more with the rubbing alcohol, stirred it, and I just kept doing that until I had enough glitter to satisfy me. And you can see that this soap is now covered in glitter. And now it's time to start taking our pieces and putting them in our mold. So I sprayed the bottom of the mold with a little bit of rubbing alcohol, and then we just grab a few handfuls of the soap pieces randomly, put them in the mold, give it a little spray of alcohol, do another layer, give it another little spray of alcohol, and then I took my Sahara Gold glitter. This is just a really pretty sparkly glitter, and I'm just putting it in this little tiny, it's actually a tea strainer, and I'm tapping over the top just to give me a thin layer of this really pretty gold mica. This part is, there's no wrong way to do this. You can layer these however you like. You can use whatever colors of glitter you like. I thought silver would be really pretty to do, or even like a black mica. And once we have them all in our container, we're going to go ahead, I'm going to tap a little bit more of the gold glitter on top. And like I said, you want to make sure that you're spraying a little bit of the rubbing alcohol in between each of the layers. This will help hold everything together. Then go ahead and grab the other soap that you had all chopped up, and you're going to melt that in the microwave just like you did with the first half. You're going to put the rest of your fragrance oil in that, and then I'm taking just a teeny bit of my blue mica just to give this a tiny bit of color. I'm going to give it another good spray with my rubbing alcohol, and I'm going to pour some of my soap base into my container very slowly, and then I'm going to tap it to make sure we don't have any air bubbles and to make sure that all of that soap covers everything and gets to the bottom. So nice tap, another spray with alcohol, and I'm going to pour a little bit more in. Another tap. Then I decided to add a little bit more of my blue to just kind of give the different layers of the clear soap that's holding everything together some different dimension. Another spray of alcohol, and then I decided to take some of the mica that I still had left in my little cups and just kind of dump that on top. If you just have a tiny bit in the bottom of your container, a little bit of rubbing alcohol, if it's dried, will loosen that up, and you can just pour it right over the top. And then once everything is poured into my container, I'm going to go ahead, give it another spray with my rubbing alcohol, and I'm going to let it dry completely. This is the hardest part because I'm not good at being patient. So once it was completely dry, my son happily took the mold apart. This was also one of his favorite parts. He was really excited to see what it looked like inside and to peel the mold off of our soap. You can see how it just slides right off the soap. And ta-da! Now we're going to cut this into smaller pieces and create our gemstones. So I'm going to cut it directly in half, and then each of those pieces I'm going to cut into 3. Now I'm going to take this piece and cut that into 3. So I'll have 6 pieces of my soap, and then I'm going to take each individual piece and start cutting it at different angles. So we're creating facets. If you think about a gemstone, it has a lot of different edges and angles that help it sparkle and shine, and so we want to create that same feel with our soap. So I'm just going to continue cutting it until I kind of have the desired shape that I like. You can see I've got some nice angles. One thing to remember is you don't want to cut it too much. Sometimes it's hard to remember not to go crazy and keep cutting. So just little tiny slivers of the soap off at different angles. And once again, there's no perfect way to do this because each gemstone is unique and different. And once I have it cut the way I like it, you're all set. You have a gorgeous piece of gemstone soap, and you can see all of the pretty glitter and the different colors of the greens and the blues, and it's crazy how it really does look like a gemstone. I've heard these called fairy crystal soap before. They're just really, really pretty. I had someone suggest doing a purple and pink one, so we did a purple and pink one, and that's it, guys. You have some really yummy soap to use in your shower that looks like a beautiful sparkling gemstone. Thank you so much for watching. If you have comments or questions, please post those below. If you liked this, give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. As always, I truly appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.